At the central judicial ring of the council station, above the white curve of the gas giant Pelagos, Merrick Voss stood behind the Earth delegation table and kept his hands flat on the rail, so no one would see the tremor in his left thumb. He was 53 years old, chief legal envoy for Earth External Affairs, and he had crossed too many chambers like this to mistake silence for neutrality. The room around him was built to make smaller worlds feel grateful for being allowed inside. Tier upon tier of seats rose in a wide circle, while the translator lattice hummed overhead. Public feed drones hung over the floor like silver insects, aimed down at the accused table. Across the chamber, under the crest of the council review office, the prosecuting bloc had already arranged a story it wanted the galaxy to believe. A border alliance, led by the Rel Compact, sat in the front row. Beside them were representatives of the Pelagos trade corridor, who had spent the past 2 days telling every outlet in the core lanes that Earth had finally shown its true face. Behind them all, on the elevated bench, Chair Proctor Sel Kareth watched with the patience of a man who believed the ending had been written before the hearing began. The charge was simple enough for any tired listener to follow. 3 days earlier, Orbit 9, a council observation station on the outer survey line, had broken apart in a flash of heat and debris. 41 crew, inspectors, and contract technicians had died. The dead included a council audit team. Hours later, trace logs placed an Earth courier vessel in communication range of the station shortly before the detonation. For most of the public, that was enough. Earth had been near the scene, council officials were dead, and someone wanted a culprit before fear spread into the trade lanes. The danger in front of Merrick was easy to read too. If the chamber accepted the prosecution's first version of events, Earth would not only be blamed for the destruction of Orbit 9. It would be isolated, sanctioned, pushed off the transit agreements that kept its colonies supplied, and marked as a civilization whose word no longer held weight in interstellar law. His first goal was smaller than innocence. He needed time. The chamber lights tightened by a fraction. A signal tone sounded. The hearing began. A clerk in pale blue robes read the formal caption of the case, then yielded to Advocate Turin Jal, counsel for the prosecuting bloc. Jal was lean, deliberate, and cold in the way only practiced public men could be. He did not open with outrage. He opened with sorrow, because sorrow played better on a live feed. He named the dead. He named the station. He named the sacred duty of the council to guard civil order in shared space. Then, with measured gravity, he turned and looked directly at the Earth table. The question before us, he said, is whether the representatives of Earth destroyed Orbit 9 in order to erase activity they did not wish inspectors to uncover. The feed drones shifted toward Merrick. He did not answer. Not yet. Jal called the first technical witness, a systems archivist from the Council Data Bureau. The witness projected a timeline into the chamber air. It appeared in clean white markers. Station routine. Minor access dispute. Unknown handshake request. 47 seconds of network conflict. Catastrophic systems failure. Structural detonation. Then came the image everyone had already seen in clipped form on the public channels. A segment of sensor capture showed a narrow Earth vessel, registry masked by glare, holding just inside long-range relay distance from Orbit 9. Not docked, not firing, simply present. Murmurs rose through the chamber seats. Jal moved carefully. Can you confirm, he asked, that the vessel's signal architecture matched known Earth courier standards? The archivist inclined her head, within 94% confidence. And can you confirm that unauthorized handshakes struck the station core within the same general window? Yes. And can you confirm that the primary black box was rendered unrecoverable by heat bloom after detonation? Yes. That single word settled into the chamber like a lock clicking shut. Unrecoverable. Merrick rose only when the clerk gave him leave. He was not tall, and he knew many in the room had expected Earth to send someone harder, louder, more visibly defiant. That misreading had helped him in the past. People often took calm for weakness until they discovered, too late, that calm could also be precision. Archivist, he said, his voice even, the timeline you presented begins at the first handshake conflict. How many hours of station activity were omitted before that point? The archivist hesitated. Those hours were not relevant to the intrusion. Window. Not relevant to intrusion, Merrick said. Relevant to causation, perhaps. Jal objected at once. Merrick had expected that. The objection was sustained in part. The chamber would not, at this stage, broaden into speculative cause. So Merrick narrowed. Then let us stay precise. Is it standard practice to publish a timeline of fatal systems failure without first establishing whether the station had prior anomalies, undisclosed arrivals, emergency maintenance, or internal access disputes in the hours before the event? The archivist shifted. In urgent public safety reviews, condensed timelines are common. Condensed is one word, Merrick said. Selective is another. That drew a few glances from the neutral benches. He pressed only once more, because too much pressure early would look desperate. You testified that the primary black box is unrecoverable. Are there no mirrored or subsidiary data stores anywhere in the station network? There are standard backups, the archivist said, but all were judged lost. Judd, Marek repeated softly. Zhao was on his feet before the echo faded. The representative of Earth is implying suppression without evidence. Merrick turned toward the bench. I'm implying only what the record now shows. That the chamber has been asked to move toward guilt while the underlying timeline remains incomplete. Chair Proctor Sel Kareth leaned forward for the first time. His face, with its narrow planes and silver markings along the jawline, betrayed almost nothing. Representative Voss, Kareth said, this chamber will determine completeness. You will confine yourself to questions. Merrick bowed his head a fraction. Of course. Inside, he marked the tone, the speed, the intervention point. Kareth had entered early. Too early for a neutral chair. The second witness made the picture worse. A relay monitor from the Border Watch testified that public panic in the outer corridors was already affecting shipping risk models. Insurance pools were freezing routes. Civilian operators were refusing contracts near Earth-managed lanes. The message was clear. This case was not merely about a dead station. It was also about whether the council would calm the markets by making an example of somebody. And Earth was convenient. By the time the first session recessed, half the room was no longer asking whether Merrick could prove innocence. They were asking whether Earth would be permitted to retain access to joint transit after sentencing. Merrick gathered his slate and stood to leave. A junior Earth aide moved toward him, pale and tight around the mouth, but Merrick stopped the man with a glance. Panic spread fastest when it found a voice. He was halfway to the diplomatic corridor when his private bracelet gave one short vibration. Not a public channel. Not an official chamber contact. Military-grade burst code. He did not break stride. He entered a side passage, waited until the sound dampers sealed behind him, and touched the bracelet to wake the message. Only one line appeared. We found a surviving module. Do not concede unrecoverable. No signature was attached, but he knew the sender anyway. Commander Lena, oars, data recovery, lead aboard the Earth support vessel holding at the edge of Council jurisdiction. For the first time that morning, Merrick let himself draw a full breath. The chamber believed all original truth had burned with Orbit 9. If Lena had found even a fragment of raw storage, then the hearing had not begun with a closed grave. It had begun with a buried witness. He looked once through the corridor glass at the distant curve of Pelagos below the station. Then he straightened his jacket and walked on. He had asked the chamber for time. Now he might be able to use it. The secure consultation room assigned to Earth was small by council standards and almost bare. That was fine with Merrick. He trusted rooms more when they offered less to hide behind. When he entered, Lena Ors was already standing at the table with one hand braced against the metal edge, the other still inside the wrist rig she used for direct system work. She had once commanded recovery teams in collision zones along the Mars approach lanes, and she carried herself like someone whose first instinct in any disaster was to count what still functioned. Her hair was pulled back hard. Her face held the exhausted focus of a woman who had not stepped away from a console for half a day. With her were two analysts and a sealed transport case, no larger than a child's lunchbox. Tell me it is real, Merrick said. Lena, touch the case. It is real. Whether it is useful is the part one cannot promise yet. He moved closer. The case opened under her palm. Inside lay a dark, warped module with one side blistered by heat and the other packed in cooling foam. Where did you get it? From a maintenance spine fragment recovered 6 million kilometers downstream from the debris field. It was not in the official wreck chart. Her mouth tightened, which is interesting by itself. Merrick looked up. Meaning either council recovery was incompetent in a very specific direction or someone never wanted this piece found. He let that sit for a moment. What do we know? Very little. The primary station core did cook off. The main archive is gone. But Orbit 9 was old. Old stations breed ugly habits. People add side storage. Local engineers create mirror paths no one updates in the master diagrams. This module was attached to a service bay recorder hub. It should have logged maintenance traffic, docking disputes, and emergency override chatter in raw packets. Should have. It is damaged. The directory tree is torn apart. We have fragments only. Merrick exhaled through his nose. Fragments can still hurt people. Lena gave him a tired look that came close to humor. That is why I called you. She projected the first clean traces into the air between them. At first the stream looked meaningless. Burst records, port signatures, timestamps with gaps wide enough to hide a fleet. Then patterns began to form. Orbit 9 had not been quiet in the hours before its death. Matic stepped closer. These docking events were not in the public record. They were not in the chamber package either, Lena said. I checked. Several unflagged cargo hulls had approached and departed over a span of 9 hours. Their transponders were dirty or partial, but the ports they used belonged to a maintenance wing supposedly closed for radiation repair. There were also local access disputes inside the station, repeated requests for sealed compartment entry, and one short burst marked with an inspection authority key that did not match routine astronomy audit procedure. Merrick folded his arms. Translate this into a sentence. Lena did not hesitate. Orbit 9 was doing more than watching empty space. He looked at the timestamps again. Could the Earth Courier have discovered this traffic and intervened? Possible, but I have not found any command sequence from our side that looks offensive. Not yet. Not yet. 2 words that could make a career or destroy one. He straightened and asked the question that mattered most. How many people know about this module? 6 aboard our support ship. 4 in this room. Now you. No one outside Earth channels. Keep it that way. One of the younger analysts, Damon, spoke from the far console. Sir, there is more. These unflagged hulls used freight geometry optimized for living cargo. Not efficient for machinery. Too much environmental regulation in the hold partitions. Merrick turned sharply. You are sure? No, not yet. But the patterns are wrong for ore, wrong for fuel, wrong for machine stock. They look like compartmentalized survival loads. Lena gave the analyst a warning glance. And until we confirm, we do not say the word out loud. Merrick understood why. Once spoken, certain possibilities changed the room. Smuggling was one kind of scandal. Human cargo, or any sentient cargo, was another. He lowered his voice. If this becomes what it sounds like, then whoever shaped the case against Earth was not just moving quickly. They were steering us away from the real reason the station died. Lena nodded. That is where my head is. A pulse sounded at the door. One of Marek's diplomatic aides stepped in after receiving permission and placed a fresh packet on the table. Public reaction summary, the aide said. Not good. Merrick opened it. The stories were already in motion. Commentators across the core lane spoke of Earth aggression, Earth secrecy, Earth resentment at Council oversight. Corridor insurers were suspending contracts on routes touching Earth-protected sectors. The Pelagos Trade Corridor had requested emergency authority to reroute freight around 3 human colonies pending the hearing outcome. The economic blade was already being lifted. He read in silence, then set the slate down. So the chamber is the visible trial. The markets are the real punishment. That was always likely, Lena said. He paced once from table to wall and back. Then we need to know who benefits most from a rapid conviction. One of the analysts pulled up a share map of corridor control, port licensing, and security oversight. The pattern was ugly but clean. If Earth lost standing, 3 blocks benefited at once. The Rel Compact gained leverage over the border lanes. The Pelagos corridor captured redirected traffic. And a council security office could argue for expanded emergency authority over inspection protocols in the outer survey region. Merrick stopped at the last item. Which office? The analyst expanded the node. Special Oversight Coordination Directorate. Merrick looked at Lena. Who supervises it? She did not answer right away. Then she enlarged the line above the office. Tair Proctor Sel Corret. For a moment, the room went still. Merrick had suspected Kareth of favoring procedural speed. That was common enough. But this was closer than comfort. If the chair responsible for constraining the hearing also sat above the office that touched outer inspection traffic, then the problem was no longer bias. The problem was architecture. Careful, Lena said. Supervision is not guilt. No, Merrick said, but it is a reason not to show our hand too early. He leaned over the damaged module and watched a new packet stream resolve. A clipped audio fragment emerged from the noise, then broke apart before it could form words. How long until you can reconstruct something chamber safe? Lena considered. To present a technical anomaly. A few hours. To accuse the council chair of anything. Much longer. I do not need an accusation yet. He tapped the table once. I need a wedge. Something narrow enough to get onto the formal record. When the second hearing session resumed, the lights felt brighter and the eyes on Earth felt colder. Jal opened with concern over delay. He spoke about the grief of families, the fragility of civic confidence, and the danger of allowing powerful member worlds to hide behind procedural fog. The words were elegant enough to sound principled. They were also designed to make any request for caution sound like moral cowardice. When Merrick was recognized, he did not mention the module. He moved instead toward the smallest truth he could prove without exposing what he had. Earth requests, he said, that the chamber acknowledge an incomplete public timeline and defer any preliminary fault finding until undisclosed docking traffic and maintenance access conflicts in the final station hours are reviewed. The room reacted exactly as he expected, not with shock, but with irritation. His request complicated a clean narrative. Zhao smiled with practiced disbelief. Undisclosed according to whom? According to the station's own residual activity logs. Kareth leaned forward. Do you possess certified originals of those logs, Representative Voss? No, I possess sufficient basis to question the record as presented. Then you ask this chamber, Kareth said, to slow a civil emergency response on the basis of uncertified inference. Merrick met his gaze. I ask this chamber not to confuse speed with accuracy. The line traveled further than he expected. A few neutral benches exchanged quiet comments. One of the humanitarian delegates keyed a note into her slate. Zhao, sensing the shift, moved in. If Earth has discovered so much, perhaps Earth will also explain its courier presence near the station. Gladly, Merrick said, when full sequence context is available. Not a denial, not an admission, just enough to deny Zhao the triumph of a trapped answer. The chair declined deferral, but he made a mistake. In refusing, Kareth stated for the record that known non-public traffic of material relevance had been confirmed at Orbit 9 prior to detonation. Merrick heard the sentence land and filed it away. It was too broad, too absolute. If the module survived review, that one line could break much more than the chair intended. Back in the consultation room after recess, Lena had new color in her face, the kind born from discovery rather than rest. We got into a deeper buffer, she said before the door sealed. You need to hear this. She played a compressed reconstruction. Static came first, then station noise, then voices clipped by corridor echoes. A speaker identified as inspection, lead Varen requested sealed bay access. Another voice refused. Varen cited emergency authority. The refusal came again, sharper. Then a third voice broke in, not station crew and not audit staff, ordering a channel closure under special oversight code. Merrick listened without moving. Run it again. Lena did. This time she overlaid the access keys. The closure code belonged to the Special Oversight Coordination Directorate. Karatha's office. Damon cleared his throat from the side console. There's more in the hold routing. We were right to worry. Compartment temperatures, water cycling, waste compression. Those bays were configured for living bodies. No one in the room spoke for several seconds. Finally, Merrick said, very carefully, say it plainly. Damon swallowed. Orbit 9 may have been a transfer point for trafficked persons moving under hidden manifests. Lena closed her eyes for a brief moment, as if bracing against the ugliness of hearing a possibility become language. Merrick felt the whole case shift beneath him. Until now, the hearing had been about innocence and blame. Now it opened into something larger and dirtier. If the station housed a covert transfer chain, then the dead audit team had probably died because they found it. And if Earth had responded to a distress call connected to that discovery, then the prosecution story was not simply false. It was a shield. He planted both palms on the table. Then we have to assume the accusation against Earth serves two purposes. 1, calm the chamber. 2, bury the actual function of Orbit 9. Lena nodded. Agreed. And whoever is steering this believes public outrage against Earth is easier to manage than public knowledge of a trafficking corridor under council cover. No one tried to improve that sentence. Merrick looked at the ruined module, then toward the chamber beyond the wall. If we are right, he said, Earth was not called here to answer for a crime. Earth was called here to wear one. No one argued. Outside, beyond layers of steel and law, the public feed continued telling the galaxy that the hearing was nearing clarity. Inside the Earth room, clarity had just become the most dangerous thing in it. By the next session, the chamber smelled faintly of hot circuitry and old nerves. Someone had increased the feed drone count. That told Merrick the story had grown larger while the chamber pretended nothing had changed. He opened the session by asking for a limited review of station schematic discrepancies. It was a narrow request, safer to the ear than a broad accusation, and he framed it the way he framed everything important now. Clear subject, clear action, clear reason. An inspection team cannot discover what does not officially exist, he said. Earth requests confirmation that Orbit 9 contained no sealed or omitted service compartments beyond the public maintenance plan. Jal objected on relevance. Kareth allowed the question in part. A facilities engineer from the Station Design Bureau took the stand. She was older, dignified, and unhappy to be present. Marek liked unhappy witnesses. Unhappy witnesses often hated the script they had been given. He walked her through the public plan layer by layer. Observation arrays, sensor cooling channels, standard life support, closed maintenance bay in the aft service spine, radiation flagged, inaccessible without repair clearance. Who issued that closure order? He asked. The engineer checked her slate. Special Oversight Coordination. Merrick let the chamber hear the title. And under normal practice, if an audit team arrives with elevated review authority, can such a bay remain closed to them? If the closure is tied to active safety risk, yes. Be informed of the existence of the closed bay. A pause. In principle, Merrick repeated. The engineer shifted. Yes, that was enough for the first wedge. He did not ask about hidden cargo. He did not mention the recovered module. He only laid one stone on the public road. There had been a closed bay. An audit team should have known about it. The public record had not mentioned it. Zhao rose at once. In chambers of crisis, he said, one can always find imperfections in maintenance bureaucracy. That does not alter the central fact. An Earth-linked vessel initiated unauthorized protocol conflict before the station was destroyed. Merrick expected the blow and let it come. Zhao called a signal warfare analyst who placed the handshake records into the air. The analyst explained, in language meant for civilians, that the station had received a packet structure consistent with a forced authentication probe from outside. The words were chosen well. Forced. Authentication. Probe. They sounded like a break-in. Source origin? Zhao asked. Best match points to Earth courier architecture. Purpose? Unknown. But the sequence is incompatible with routine civilian exchange. Zhao turned toward Merrick. There is your context. The feed drones dipped toward the Earth table. Merrick stood, buttoned his jacket with one hand, and made himself sound almost bored. Analyst, is it fair to say that any handshake pattern can appear hostile when presented without the preceding emergency channel history? The analyst frowned. Emergency context could alter interpretation. Could it reverse it? In some cases. Then tell the chamber whether your presentation includes all distress frequencies received by Orbit 9 in the final hour. The analyst hesitated. No. Why not? Because my review remit concerned external intrusion signatures. There it is, Merrick said, turning slightly so his voice carried to the outer benches. A packet shown as attack may, in full sequence, be response. Jal objected again. Kareth sustained again. But a sound had entered the room, small and important. Not outrage. Curiosity. Merrick sat down. A minute later his wrist bracelet gave a silent pulse. Yet when offered repeated opportunities, he still refuses to explain why an Earth vessel reached into a Council station's core systems moments before detonation. Merrick rose before the chair could invite him. That was technically rude. It was also useful. Because, he said, the explanation requires the chamber to admit there was a distress event before the packet conflict. You keep calling an intrusion. The chamber came alive. Voices rose. Kareth struck for order. Representative Voss, the chair said sharply, you will state whether Earth possesses certified proof of that claim. Merrick could feel every eye in the room. Not yet, he thought. Not enough to survive exposure, but enough to force the line onto the record. Earth possesses sufficient basis to challenge the prosecution's frame. That is not an answer. It is the only responsible answer until the chamber stops denying missing context. Kareth's expression hardened. This hearing will not be hijacked by suggestion. Suggestion. The word told Merrick more than any formal ruling. A neutral chair would have said speculation. Kareth said suggestion, as if the danger lay less in falsehood than in giving listeners the wrong idea. Zhao requested a recess for evidentiary review. Kareth granted a short one. The instant the side doors closed, Merrick was moving. He reached the Earth room in 9 long strides. Lena had the reconstructed sequence already waiting in the air. The audio began with station corridor noise, then a clipped voice identified as inspection lead Varen. Emergency authority. Open the bay. Looked up from another terminal. There is more in the directory rubble. I found personnel routing tags. Not names yet, but there were non-crew biometrics cycling through bay support. Too many. Repeating in batches. Batches of what size? Small enough to hide. Large enough to matter. Lena spoke before Merrick could. Living cargo. The room dimmed in Marek's mind for a moment, as if some inner lens had narrowed. He thought of the station's public identity. Remote science platform. Quiet. Technical. Forgettable. Perfect. He also thought of something else. If the Earth courier had answered a distress call, why had it not saved anyone? He asked the question aloud. Lena brought up the final seconds before detonation. The handshake initiated. The station denied the connection. Then, from a higher authority channel, a remote lock sequence cascaded across internal systems. Doors sealed. External access died. 23 seconds later, the reactor safeties failed in a pattern no panic or accident should produce. That is not a station falling apart, Merrick said. No, Lena be bleed. That is someone making sure no one walks out and no one gets in. The door's signal pulsed. An aide entered breathless. They are changing procedure in there. Chair Kareth is moving to restrict direct presentation by delegations. From this point forward, all digital exhibits go through central chamber validation first. Lena svir softly. Merrick did not. His anger had gone colder than language, as Kareth announced the new procedure in the name of evidence security. There were murmurs now, sharper than before. Merrick requested the floor. Denied. He requested an objection on the ground that the procedural revision materially advantaged the party controlling the chamber archive. Granted only as notation, not debate. That too was useful. The record now showed Earth had objected to the chair's control over digital evidence. Zhao then delivered what he thought would be the closing turn. He projected a simplified sequence for the public feed. Earth vessel nearby. Unauthorized handshake. Network conflict. Dead station. This is what the galaxy can understand, he said. Not a maze of delayed insinuations. Not a performance of grievance. Merrick remained seated until the line settled. Then he rose with such deliberate calm that even the feed drones seemed to pause. What the galaxy can understand, he said, is that the chamber keeps trimming away everything that happened before Earth answered the station. He had chosen the verb carefully. Answered. The room stirred. Jal pounced. Answered what? Representative? Merrick looked toward the bench, not the prosecutor. A distress event, he said. Caratha's voice cracked across the chamber. Enough. Until certified evidence is lodged, the representative of Earth will not continue this line. There it was. Public. Naked. Unmistakable. The chair was not merely ruling. He was stopping a specific sentence from being heard. From the neutral benches, Sarah Dallin activated her microphone. Chair, she said, if a distress event is even plausibly in question, why has the chamber not ordered independent technical review before considering sanctions? Case gather itself into one sharp point. Show me. The image was damaged, flickering, skewed by impact. But it was enough. Rows of narrow compartments. Field cots. Water lines. Restraint anchors. Not an equipment annex. Not a radiation lockout. A holding bay. And moving at the edge of the frame, too fast to see clearly, were figures in inspection colors. One turned toward the lens. The audio fractured, but 2 words survived. Found them. The clip ended in static and alarm. No one in the Earth room spoke. They did not need to. The meaning was too obvious for speech. Orbit 9 had not died because Earth attacked a science station. Orbit 9 had died because someone decided discovery was more dangerous than murder. The next 12 hours belonged to doors that should have opened and did not. Council procedure allowed for emergency evidentiary conferences, but the phrase made them sound cleaner than they were. In practice, there were contests over who got to decide what reality would look like when the chamber lights came back on. Merrick spent those hours moving between 3 rooms and never sitting for more than 2 minutes at a time. In the first room, he met with Earth staff and Lena's team to decide what could be shown without surrendering the module itself. In the second room, he met, one by one, with delegates who had publicly raised questions after the chair's interruption. In the third room, he met with silence, because the formal conference called by Carath excluded direct delegation participation and expected Earth to wait outside like a well-behaved suspect. He did not wait passively. Sarah Dallin received him first. The Vade delegate was older than he had guessed from the chamber distance, with a face worn into permanent caution. Her coalition managed refugee passages in sectors most core powers preferred not to see. She had not spoken much during the public hearing. People like they were usually either weak or dangerous. Merrick judged her to be the second kind. You have 5 minutes, she said. That is enough. He did not start with outrage. He started with sequence. Audit team finds omitted bay. Distress burst sent. Earth courier response. Chamber presents response as attack. Chair revises evidence procedure the moment Earth challenges the sequence. Dallin listened without expression. Then he added the part he had not intended to share so soon. The omitted bay was configured for living bodies. Her eyes hardened by a degree. You are sure? We have partial visual and system support. Not yet ready for the chamber. Enough to justify independent review. She looked past him to the station glass. If you are wrong, you are asking me to help you accuse the chamber of manipulating a mass casualty hearing. If I am wrong, Merrick said, Earth loses standing and I lose my career. I know the risk. The question is whether you know what it means if I am right. Dallin turned back to him. It means the council did not merely miss a crime. It means someone inside it used your world as cover. Yes, that won him another 3 minutes. Han Vec was harder. The Myron technical assessor cared for systems, not morality, and disliked anyone who arrived with a political smell on them. Merrick gave him data architecture, validation chain, and packet order. He never used the words trafficking or cover-up. He talked instead about incomplete sequence, chain corruption, and chamber control over validation flow. Vec interrupted only once. If the chair's office touches the oversight directorate connected to the station, why did you not raise conflict at the opening? Because suspicion is not proof, and I needed the chair to overreach on the public record before I said the word conflict. Vec stared at him for a long moment, then gave the smallest nod. Engineers appreciated timing when it was done well. Island Task of the Outer Settlements was the bluntest of the three. I do not like Earth, Tosk said in greeting. You are not required to. And I like Hidden Council offices even less. Then our interests overlap for an afternoon. Tosk barked a dry laugh. By the time Merrick finished with the 3 delegates, he had not won allies. Allies were too expensive. What he had won was something better for this stage. He had won reluctance to let Kareth close the file quickly. That was enough to slow the machine. Lena called him into the Earth room an hour later. She had isolated a higher privilege credential inside the recovered module, one used repeatedly to open the hidden bay and reroute audit alerts. The signature is masked, she said, but the authority path is not. It resolves through the Special Oversight Coordination Directorate, Kareth's office, the office under his authority. Lena corrected. Careful with language. He appreciated her for that. Loose words had ruined many righteous cases. What about named personnel? Still digging. But I found one more thing. She expanded a series of internal service notices. The audit team had been rerouted twice before reaching the bay. Somebody on station kept steering them away. How long? 42 minutes. Merrick felt the weight of that delay. 42 minutes in a chamber was an inconvenience. 42 minutes in a place where people were being held behind sealed walls was a measure of how long a system could keep itself from seeing what it had already touched. Another analyst brought up corridor finance data. The Pelagos trade corridor had lobbied for expanded emergency transport control less than a day after the Orbit 9 destruction. Draft petitions were time-stamped before the public hearing even convened. Merrick read the timestamps twice. So they expected sanctions before the chamber had ruled. They prepared for them, Lena said, because they were confident, or because they were part of the push. He ran a hand over his jaw. The case now had layers enough to drown in. A hidden bay for living bodies. An audit team discovering it. A distress call. An Earth response reframed as intrusion. A chair controlling evidence flow. Trade blocks poised to exploit an Earth conviction. Every layer made the story bigger, but bigger was not always better in a live hearing. Bigger could sound messy. Bigger could let guilty people hide behind audience fatigue. He needed a line of attack simple enough to survive the chamber. Not everything. One thing. He built it in his head while looking at the data cloud. The chair's office oversaw the directorate that controlled the station closure. The audit team sent a distress call. The Earth vessel answered. The distress call was omitted. The evidence procedure changed when Earth raised that omission. That was enough. Not enough to finish. Enough to break the shield. When the chamber reconvened, the benches were fuller than before. Word had spread through the station. Even officials who had no formal role in the hearing came to watch. Nothing attracted power like the smell of a possible shift in power. Kareth opened in a tone scrubbed of all visible irritation. The chamber has reviewed procedural concerns. Limited questions regarding evidentiary chain may proceed. Broader allegations remain outside scope unless independently certified. Reasonable language. Dangerous structure. Merrick stood when called and kept his opening clean. I will ask only about timing, authority, and omission. Zhao looked tired for the first time. The first witness was a chamber records officer responsible for the digital exhibit pipeline. Merrick walked him through the moment the evidence procedure changed. At whose direction was the revision drafted? The chair's office requested emergency implementation. Before or after Earth asserted the existence of a distress event. After. How soon after? 7 minutes. A murmur rolled through the seats. Zhao objected on insinuation. Merrick did not even look at him. He had no interest in fighting over the obvious. Better to keep the witnesses building it piece by piece. The second witness was a communications supervisor attached to the Oversight Directorate. Does your office receive, audit distress traffic from survey stations? Merrick asked. When routed through oversight channels, yes. Did your office receive any elevated audit alert from Orbit 9 before the alleged intrusion? The supervisor froze the way honest people freeze when given a path to lie and discovering it is narrower than expected. Zhao rose. The witness has not reviewed the total archive dash. Merrick cut in, unusually sharp. Then let him answer what he has reviewed. Kareth allowed the answer. Yes, the supervisor said quietly. A flagged irregularity notice was received. The room changed temperature. At what time relative to the alleged intrusion? Before it. Was that alert included in the chamber's opening sequence? No. Who determined that omission? I do not know. That was fine. Merrick had not expected a name this early. He wanted the chronology in public. He wanted listeners to hear with their own ears that the chamber had opened a mass casualty hearing with the order of events reversed. He turned, then, toward Kareth. Chair Proctor, for clarity of record, does the chamber still maintain that no non-public traffic of material relevance has been confirmed prior to the Earth Handshake event? The question landed like metal. Zhao objected furiously. Kareth could have sustained and moved on. Instead, he made the mistake Merrick had hoped for. He answered, the chamber maintains that no confirmed traffic alters the essential evidentiary posture of this case. Not a denial anymore. A retreat. Merrick saw Dallin write something immediately on her slate. Vec leaned toward another assessor and spoke in low, rapid phrases. Tosk folded both arms and stared. Directly at the chair. Merrick took the next step. Then let us speak of essential posture. Does the chair's supervisory chain include special oversight coordination, the office whose closure codes govern the concealed bay at Orbit 9? The whole room went silent. Even Kareth did not answer at once. Administrative supervision, he said finally, does not imply operational involvement. Agreed, Merrick said. Then no innocent office should fear independent review. That line did more work than a speech could have done. Kareth denied the request. He cited institutional stability, pending certification, and the danger of opening sensitive oversight systems during a crisis. There it was. Stability. Whenever power stopped defending facts and started defending stability, it usually meant the facts were turning against it. The hearing recessed again under a cloud no one could ignore. When Merrick returned to the Earth room, he was certain of two things. First, he had cracked the first shell. Second, the people inside the second shell were now deciding whether to run, cut losses, or strike back. Lena had reached the protected visual buffer by then. She did not greet him. She simply played the restored clip. The image was grainy, skewed, and crossed with artifact lines, but the room it showed was unmistakable. A converted service bay. Rows of cots fixed in stacked frames. Compact hygiene lines. Restraint points built into the support rails. Not accident. Not temporary. Designed use. Inspection lead Varen moved through the frame with two others, one carrying a local torch. Someone behind the camera said, "How many?" Varen answered, "Enough." He stepped toward a side wall and opened a manifest plate. The view blurred, then cleared long enough to catch a partial data slate held near the lens. Names. Transfer numbers. Destination codes. Lena froze the image and enhanced the lower right corner. A route seal from the Pelagos trade corridor. Merrick felt the story click into a harsher shape. Not only hidden transport. Not only oversight protection. Commercial use. The next frames shook violently as alarms started. A voice from off-screen shouted that central lockout had engaged. Varen turned toward the camera. "If this goes out," he said, each word breaking around static, send it beyond the chamber. Then the feed died. No one breathed for a second. Min spoke first. He knew. "Yes," Merrick said. He knew internal channels were compromised. Lena enlarged the manifest. Again, one more mark became visible under the corridor seal. Small. Easy to miss. The validation cipher of special oversight coordination. Merrick looked from the cipher to the silent chamber wall beyond the room. Everything the hearing had pretended were separate problems was now one system. The hidden bay, the blocked inspection, the missing distress call, the controlled narrative. The corridor that stood to profit. The chair who kept saying stability as if stability were a sacrament beyond scrutiny. He also understood the danger. If he walked into the chamber and shouted trafficking, conspiracy, murder, and corruption all at once, the guilty would survive inside the noise. Listeners needed a road, not a flood. So he chose the road. The next session, he would not accuse Kareth of building the system. He would ask a chain of questions so plain that only guilt could refuse them. Who ordered the bay hidden? Who received the audit distress alert? Who blocked independent validation? Who stood to gain if Earth were condemned before the hidden bay became public? The answers might not all come that day. They did not need to. He needed only one final thing to shift the burden. He needed the visual proof into a neutral display channel. As if hearing his thought, Sarah Dallin entered the room without waiting for invitation. Han Vec and Island Tosk came behind her. Dallin looked at the frozen image of the hidden bay and did not waste breath on surprise. "You were telling the truth," she said. "Yes," Merrick answered. Vec stepped closer to the manifest plate. "I can certify that this is not a simple forge. Not from a walk-in review, but enough to justify emergency independent relay." Tosk's face was hard in a way Merrick had seen only on commanders approaching a boundary they had delayed crossing for too long. "If the chair blocks this now," Tosk said, "he declares himself." Dallin turned to Merrick. "What do you need?" He met her gaze. "A display channel the chair cannot close before the first 30 seconds play." The three delegates looked at one another. Then Vex said, "We can do better than 30. For the first time since Orbit 9 entered the hearing, Merrick allowed himself the smallest shape of confidence. Not victory, just footing. He had entered the chamber as the convenient defendant in a clean public story. Now the story was no longer clean, and the people who had written it were running out of places to stand. When the final public session opened, the chamber was beyond full. Overflow observers stood in the upper galleries. Secondary feed drones floated behind the formal array. Even the clerks moved with the stiff care of people who knew that whatever happened next would be replayed for years, whether as law or warning. Merrick arrived early enough to feel the room before it began. He preferred that. Tension had a shape if one listened for it. This chamber no longer felt like a place preparing to condemn Earth. It felt like a place waiting to discover which of its own walls might crack first. At the Earth table, Lena sat 2 seats behind him in formal civilian dress with a neutral data slate on the rail before her. The recovered module itself remained under armed seal aboard the support vessel. If the chamber seized the physical source too soon, the whole case could vanish into closed review. So they had built a safer route instead. Hanvek's technical office would carry the relay stream. Sarah Dallin and Island Tosk would certify procedural necessity. Merrick looked once toward the high bench. Sel Kareth had restored his public calm. The silver lines along his jaw reflected the chamber lights with almost ceremonial precision. If he was worried, he hid it well. But Merrick had seen the man answer too many direct questions now. Worry or not, Kareth knew the field was narrower than it had been the day before. Zhao opened the session with one last attempt to pull the story back into familiar shape. He spoke of institutional attack. He spoke of the danger posed when accused parties introduced chaotic late-stage material. He spoke of grief being exploited for political theater. It was a strong performance. It might even have worked if the chamber had not already heard, on the public record, that a distress alert predated the alleged Earth intrusion and that the chair's office had tightened control over evidence after Earth raised the omission. When Merrick was recognized, he stood without notes. "The question before this chamber has changed," he said. "It is no longer whether Earth can be made to fit a convenient sequence. It is whether this chamber will look directly at the sequence that already exists." Zhao objected. Kareth overruled him, but only to the extent of allowing a structured evidentiary request. Merrick inclined his head. "Good. Then let us structure it plainly." He turned toward the neutral benches rather than the prosecution. First, an audit team at Orbit 9 sent an irregularity alert before the Earth handshake event. This is now admitted. Second, that alert was omitted from the opening chamber sequence. This is now admitted. Third, The office chain connected to that alert falls under the same supervisory branch that revised digital evidence procedure after Earth raised the omission. This is also admitted. Earth now requests that an independent relay authorized by Technical Assessor Han Vec display supplemental station data sufficient to determine whether the omitted alert concerned routine maintenance or concealed activity material to the cause of death at Orbit 9. Karatha's answer came fast. No. A wave of voices rolled through the room. Vec activated his microphone before Zhao could rise. Chair, I have personally reviewed the relay integrity wrapper. The request meets threshold for emergency technical display. Dallin followed, and the humanitarian implications of continued suppression are no longer hypothetical. Tosk added the final weight. Deny this, and you deny review of possible mass abuse at a council site. Karath struck for order. In the interest of chamber stability that word again. Merrick did not plan to interrupt. He did anyway. Stability? For whom? It was not loud. It did not need to be. The question cut because everyone in the room knew it had been waiting there. Karatha's eyes came to him. Hard now. All public softness gone. For the shared legal order, he said. Merrick nodded once. Then the shared legal order should survive 30 seconds of fact. Vec did not wait for permission after that. Perhaps he had decided the chamber was already past ordinary obedience. Perhaps he simply believed systems should not hide their own failure. Whatever the reason, he touched his slate and the independent relay channel opened over the chamber floor. Kara shouted for the display to stop. Too late. The first image appeared. Damaged service bay. Rows of cots. Water lines. Restraint anchors. The whole chamber seemed to inhale at once. No one in the room needed technical training to understand what they were seeing. Zhao rose half from his seat and stopped there, as if his own muscles had not chosen the movement. Karath struck the bench for order again, but the order was gone. Not in noise. In certainty. The kind that arrives before language catches up. Vec's relay ran forward. Inspection lead Varen moved through the frame. The torch beam swept over compartment numbers. A manifest plate flashed close to the lens. Dallin was already on her feet, demanding freeze enhancement. Vec complied. Pelagos trade corridor seal. Special oversight validation cipher. The chamber erupted. Delegates began speaking at once into private channels. Clerks stared openly. Feed drones adjusted to capture every face that mattered. Merrick did not speak over the noise. He waited for it to sharpen. When it did, he pointed to the image and said, "This is why the alert was omitted." He did not need more. Zhao found his voice first. Unauthenticated visual artifact. Context unknown. Source chain controlled by Earth. It was the right defense on paper. It sounded hollow in the room. Lena stood then, not because the story required drama, but because the explanation required competence. She identified herself for the record as Commander Lena, Ors, Earth Recovery Lead, and spoke in the plain tone of someone who would rather be at a workbench than under lights. The chamber already knows the recovered module is real because its packet structure aligns with admitted oversight traffic. Technical Assessor Vec has reviewed the wrapper. Distress traffic in the same module predates the Earth handshake. The visual sequence sits in the same damage pattern and chain cluster. Either the entire module is genuine, or the chamber must now explain how Earth forged not only a hidden bay, but the oversight alert chronology already admitted by council witnesses. That landed hard because it offered no rhetorical comfort. The evidence was either a whole truth or a whole impossibility. Partial disbelief no longer worked. Karath attempted to suspend the session. Dallin objected publicly. Tosk objected publicly. Vec objected publicly. Under chamber rules, 3 concurrent objections from recognized delegates forced a procedural vote on suspension. The vote failed. For the first time since the hearing began, Karath could not move the room by authority alone. Merrick asked for a recall of the Oversight Communications Supervisor. The witness was brought back, visibly shaken. Did your office receive the irregularity alert before detonation? Merrick asked. Yes. Did that alert concern a hidden bay not present in the public station plan? A long pause. Yes. Did that bay contain living persons held under concealed manifests? The witness swallowed. The preliminary tag suggested unauthorized biological occupancy. Murmurs burst again. Merrick continued. Did your office notify the public hearing team that such concealed occupancy may have existed before the chamber opened this case against Earth? No. Why not? The witness looked toward Kareth by reflex. That glance changed everything. It lasted less than a second. It said more than a confession could have said. Merrick did not exploit it theatrically. He simply let the room see it. Then he asked, "Were you instructed to restrict distribution?" The witness closed his eyes. Yes. By whom? Zhao was on his feet before the name could form. Privilege. Institutional privilege. The witness cannot be compelled to reveal protected supervisory communications in open chamber. A good move. Fussed. Necessary. And fatal. Because it told every listener that there was indeed a supervisor whose name mattered. Tosk slammed his palm onto the rail before him. Protected from whom? The dead inspectors? Dallin's voice followed like ice. Or protected from the worlds you were ready to sanction using incomplete evidence. Kareth tried again to restore order. The chamber obeyed the sound of his gavel less each time. Merrick made the choice then to stop chasing a single name and chase the system instead. Names could be delayed. Structures were harder to deny. He turned to the chamber floor display and brought up, through Vex Relay, a simplified sequence prepared during the recess. He had insisted on simplicity. A listener in a cargo bunk halfway across the corridor worlds needed to understand it on the first pass. Step 1. Audit team discovers concealed bay containing living persons. Step 2. Audit team sends irregularity alert and distress request. Step 3. Oversight office receives alert. Step 4. Earth courier responds to distress. Step 5. Chamber opens hearing using Step 4 as if it were Step 1. He spoke each line slowly and only once. This, he said, is the case as it was given to the galaxy. Not incomplete by accident. Reversed. The word reversed traveled through the chamber better than any accusation. Zhao traveled more angle. Even if all of that were accepted, Earth has yet to explain why its courier was in proximity to a restricted station before the distress response. Merrick was ready for that, because Lena had finally given him the answer at dawn. The vessel was Courier Ravelin, he said. It was under contract to deliver replacement cryogenic valves to a fuel depot 2 million kilometers inward from Orbit 9. Its route is filed in corridor logistics. The prosecution did not mention that because routine proximity is less useful to panic than suggested predation. Vec confirmed the filing from public transit records. Another clean stone laid. Zhao sat down more heavily than before. The chamber could feel the center giving way, but the last and ugliest truth still waited. If Merrick stopped now, the system would sacrifice 2 or 3 officials, condemn a few procedures, and call the wound contained. Orbit 9 would become a scandal of omission rather than what it actually was. He looked to Lena. She gave the smallest nod. Vec cued the final recovered fragment. This one had no image at first. Only sound. Corridor alarms. Footsteps. Someone shouting to open external transfer locks. Then inspection, lead Varen's voice, clearer than before. If this goes out, send it beyond the chamber. Oversight is involved. Do not route internal. The audio clicked. A second voice asked, "Who signed the manifests?" Varen answered with a strain that sounded like a man running while reading at once. Pelago's corridor carriers. Oversight validation. Emergency quarantine cover. Gods, there are children in Dash, the rest shattered under alarm distortion and a rising mechanical whine. No one in the chamber moved. Merrick had chosen this fragment last on purpose. Listeners needed the legal frame first, then the human cost. Otherwise horror turned to noise. Now the room had the frame, and the human cost entered it like a blade. Dallin pressed both hands to her table, face gone pale with controlled anger. Vec quietly muted the replay before the final whine became the detonation. Kareth spoke into the silence, and for the first time since the hearing began his voice was not fully steady. The chamber will enter immediate internal security review and close this session to Dash. No, Merrick said. He did not shout it. He did not need to. He stepped out from behind the Earth table and stood where every feed drone could take him in one clean frame. With respect to the dead and to every world watching, no. Karatha's eyes fixed on him. Representative Voss, you do not direct this chamber. Not usually, Merrick said. But I do know when a chamber has lost the right to hide behind its own walls. The room held still around him. You brought Earth here under full public light. You invited the galaxy to watch while incomplete evidence was arranged as certainty. You were prepared to punish my world before this room admitted the station's final alert even existed. Now that the buried sequence is visible, now that the hidden bay is visible, now that the oversight chain is visible, you do not get to move the truth back into a private room because it has become uncomfortable. Earth is not asking for mercy. Earth is not asking to be liked. Earth is asking for exactly the standard this chamber claims to represent. If public accusation was appropriate when the target was convenient, then public accounting is appropriate now that the convenience is broken. Someone at Orbit 9 hid living persons behind false quarantine seals. An audit team found them. A distress call was sent. Earth answered. Instead of rescuing those people, a system above the station sealed the channels, let the station die, and then pointed at us. That is what this hearing has shown. Not because the chamber was courageous enough to reveal it, but because it failed to erase it in time. No applause came. This was not that kind of room. What came instead was worse for the guilty. Agreement without noise. Dallin requested an emergency motion to remove supervisory control of the case from Karatha's office, pending independent criminal inquiry. Kosk seconded. Vec thirded with technical grounds and added a request for immediate seizure of all Pelago's corridor manifest servers linked to Orbit 9. The motion carried by overwhelming voice vote before Karath could frame the terms. Security entered from the rear, not running, not dramatic, simply present and undeniable. They did not seize Karath on the spot. Institutions of this size rarely delivered such clean theater. But they did something more important. They informed him, before the live chamber and the live feeds, that his office no longer controlled the proceeding. The hearing did not end immediately. Additional witnesses confirmed that corridor transport clerks had bypassed humanitarian review and that emergency sanction drafts against Earth had been prepared before the chamber even opened. Piece by piece, the room stopped asking whether the hidden bay existed and started asking how many other stations might have served the same function. That question changed the scale of fear in the chamber. Late in the session, Dallin requested that Merrick state for the record what relief Earth sought. He answered carefully. First, the immediate withdrawal of all proposed sanctions and route restrictions tied to this hearing. Second, independent criminal review of every office and commercial carrier linked to Orbit 9. Third, transfer of all surviving occupants, records, and route data under humanitarian protection, not oversight custody. Fourth, public correction of a chamber sequence. He stopped there. Dallin waited. And beyond that, Merrick looked around the room, at the benches that had nearly condemned Earth, at the clerks now rewriting the record, at the feed drones carrying his words outward. Beyond that, Earth asks for nothing that is not already owed. We do not need the chamber to think well of us. We needed to stop finding us useful when truth becomes expensive. This time, no one objected. By the time the session finally closed, the sanctions initiative was dead. Karatha's supervisory access was frozen. Pelago's corridor manifests were seized pending review. Special oversight coordination had been locked out of its own archives by an emergency cross-office warrant signed by 3 independent delegates. Earth had walked into the chamber under suspicion of destroying a station. It walked out having forced the chamber to admit that the station had been part of a system willing to kill its own inspectors and blame the nearest convenient world. The corridor outside was louder than any place Merrick wanted to be. Reporters, aides, delegates, security, analysts, all flowing around one another in currents of alarm and opportunity. Earth staff formed a moving shield around him and Lena, guiding them toward the diplomatic lifts. Halfway there, Sarah Dallin caught up. "You understand," she said, falling into step beside him, that this will not stop at one station. Of course, Vec joined them from the other side. The route seals in your manifest plate intersect at least 6 other corridor nodes. Can you prove it? Merrick asked. Not yet, but I can prove they require inspection. Tosk arrived last, expression set like carved stone. The outer settlements have reported disappearances for years, he said. Most were dismissed as pirate loss or unregistered migration. I will not make that mistake again. At the lift vestibule, Dallin looked at Merrick directly. You were right about one thing. The chamber wanted your world to wear the crime. He met her gaze. It will try again, somewhere else, if this network is larger than Orbit 9. Yes, she said. Which means this was not your victory. No, Merrick agreed. It was only the first place the lie broke. Inside the lift, with the noise cut off at last, Lena leaned back against the wall and closed her eyes. You know what bothers me most? She said. Choose one. She let out a tired breath. That after all the variables, Earth was still the easiest story to sell. Merrick watched the floor numbers descend. It often is, he said. We are large enough to fear, inconvenient enough to doubt, and outside enough to blame. The lift reached the diplomatic level. They stepped into a quieter corridor lined with filtered light that failed to calm anyone. Inside the Earth suite, the staff exhaled as one organism. Some sat down where they stood. Others moved toward consoles because stopping completely would have let the delayed shock arrive too fast. Merrick went straight to the side window. Pelagos curved below the station, vast and banded with pale storms. Somewhere in that beauty were the trade lanes whose seals had appeared on a hidden bay manifest. Somewhere farther out lay the debris of Orbit 9, still turning in cold arcs around nothing. He thought of Aaron's voice. Send it beyond the chamber. In the end, the dead inspector had understood the problem before Merrick did. The chamber was never meant to be the safest place for truth, only the most prestigious. Lena came to stand beside him. I asked the recovery team to keep working the module, she said. There are route branches we have not opened. Personnel tag. Maybe location chains. There will be more, Merrick said. You sound certain. I am. Earth had not one because the Council rediscovered conscience. Earth had one because a fragment of truth survived heat, vacuum, bureaucracy, and fear long enough to be placed in front of people who could no longer pretend not to see it. That mattered. It also meant the larger work had only begun. Hours later, after the first crisis calls and preliminary statements, Merrick sat alone in the small working room off his quarters and drafted the line he would send to Earth Central before sleep took him or failed to. He kept a plane. Orbit 9 was not an isolated false accusation. It appears to have been one node in a protected transport network hidden under emergency oversight authority and commercial corridor cover. The chamber has withdrawn sanctions. Supervisory control over the hearing has been removed from Cell Caratha's office. Independent review is underway. We should assume further resistance once inspections spread beyond the first site. He paused, then added one more paragraph. Recommend immediate preparation for cooperative exposure, not celebratory posture. Many worlds that doubted Earth today may prove useful tomorrow if given a path to join the truth without public humiliation. The network behind Orbit 9 is larger than one office and older than one hearing. He signed the transmission and sent it. Then he sat in the quiet and listened to the low life support hum in the walls. Humanity had been dragged into the center of a public lie and expected to carry it because that was simpler for everyone with power. Humanity had refused. Not with fury, not with spectacle, with sequence, with patience, with evidence kept alive long enough to speak. Not easily crushed, not when it mattered. He rose at last, turned off the room light, and left the transmit screen dark behind him. Beyond the station, cargo lanes burned thin lines across the night side of Pelagos. Somewhere along those lines, other sealed manifests were moving, or waiting, or preparing to vanish now that Orbit 9 had failed to stay buried. The hearing was over. The work beyond it had just begun. Earth did not walk into that chamber looking for sympathy. It walked in carrying the weight of a lie that others were ready to make permanent. But the truth survived. Not because the system was fair. Not because power suddenly found a conscience. It survived because someone chose not to look away and someone else refused to bend. Orbit 9 was only one station, one hidden wound in a much larger machine. And now that the first crack has opened, the rest of the galaxy will have to decide what matters more, comfort or truth. Because in the end, humanity was never dangerous for standing its ground. Humanity was dangerous because it remembered, because it endured, and because it would not quietly carry the guilt of other empires. If this story stayed with you, if it made you think, or if you want to see, what happens when a next hidden truth is dragged into the light? Make sure to like this video, share it with someone who loves science fiction, and subscribe to the channel. There are more stories waiting beyond the chamber, and the next one may hit even harder.